Today we're going to be making runzas, homemade runzas, or cabbage pockets. They're called a variety of things, but I'm from Nebraska, so they're called runzas here. And so first thing I did was gave my hands a quick rinse and wash them real good. And then I am now going to cut some cabbage to brown or to saute with the meat mixture. Okay, so you can use either red cabbage or green cabbage. I didn't want to make up a huge batch of the runzas today, so I just got a head of red cabbage because it was smaller. So we're just going to finely shred it and cut up enough for what the batch of runzas we'll be making today. In my house, I have a couple of guys that aren't real big cabbage fans, and so I tend to dice it a little smaller than some and not put quite as much in as some people would inside their meat. Okay, now that I have the amount of cabbage chopped that I want to chop, we're going to go ahead and start with the meat. And this time I'm doing sausage for our runzas, but you could use ground beef, you could use whatever type of meat you want to use. I've used a variety, but sausage is what we're choosing for tonight. So I'm just going to start letting it get browned a little bit, and then I'll add the cabbage in after I add some seasonings in. For seasonings for this, I don't use anything too fancy. It's just some salt and then some pepper. And then I'm going to use a little bit of onion powder. And a little bit of garlic powder. You can kind of customize your seasonings to however you like. Those are just kind of my 4 basic ones I use pretty much in everything. So as you can see, I have the ground pork pretty much all cooked up. It's getting pretty close, so I'm going to go ahead and add in the cabbage and let that cook together. Okay, so you can see that it's all in there together, and I'm just going to let that cook so the cabbage can start to soften just a little bit for probably a couple minutes, and then we'll mix up the dough. Okay, so now we're going to mix up the dough for the runzas, and I just used like a pizza dough mix recipe, so it's a pretty basic one, and it will rise up real quick. Okay, so the first thing we're going to add in is 4.5 or 2 packages of yeast. I always buy my yeast in a big pack, so I have to do the measurement or the equivalent of the packages, but you can just use 2 packages. So. And then to that we're going to add 2 tablespoons of sugar. And then 2 cups of warm water, which will let that yeast bloom up. And we'll just let that start to activate here for just a minute. Okay, it looks like everything's good. My water wasn't too hot. The yeast is starting to foam up. So to that I'm going to add 2 teaspoons of salt. And then 5 cups of flour. And I just used all-purpose flour. You could use bread flour if you like, but usually on my pizza dough I just use all-purpose flour. And then I'm going to start mixing this together. And you want to go slow so you don't have like a flour bomb explode inside your face. And then as that starts combining, we're going to add about 4 tablespoons of vegetable oil, or olive oil, or whatever oil you want to add. I think mine's actually canola oil, and sometimes I do olive oil. And I don't measure. One important thing to know when you're making a bread dough, it takes a while sometimes for all that moisture to be absorbed, and so you want to let it mix around a little bit before you know if you need to add more oil or not. But this is looking pretty good, so I'm going to go ahead and crank the speed and let it also knead for a couple minutes too. Okay, I let this knead for a few minutes after getting everything all mixed together. And so now I'm just going to pull the dough hook out of it and put that in the wash. And it's still a little bit tacky, but the dough is, but you want it to be that way. And so what I do is I just take the dough and leave it in the bowl and just put the bowl over in a warmer spot in the kitchen, cover it with a towel, and let it rise for about 15 to 20 minutes. Okay, so my dough has raised enough that now I'm going to start rolling it out. So what I do is just put a little bit of flour on the counter, which I'm going to do real quick, so my dough won't stick. And then I just pull off a chunk of dough and I roll it out to my desired size. So that's kind of what it will look like when it's the desired size. I'm not sure if I'm getting a very good angle of that. And then I can just fill it with the toppings. So I'm going to put my meat mixture in, and then I like to put cheese in mine too. And so we'll put some cheese in it, and then I'll seal it up and all the edges and show you what it looks like after I get them all done. Okay, so now I have all the runzas stuffed, sealed, and ready to go in the oven, and I just put them on a baking sheet and I line it with parchment paper because of ease of cleaning later on, and then I put it in the oven at 400 degrees for about 15 minutes, sometimes a little longer depending on how big my runzas are, and tonight they're kind of big so it might take longer.